Sometime in the early 2000s, over lunch at Augusta National during Masters Week, one golfer looked at his friend and made him a bet, $150,000, that his friend wouldn't live to see 50. It sounded like the kind of thing golfers say to each other after too many drinks, and it probably was that too. But the man making the bet wasn't just messing around. And the man on the other end of it had spent the better part of 2 decades giving him every reason to mean it. That bet is the reason we're telling this story, because years later, it came a lot closer to being right than anyone wanted it to be. The man making the wager was Fuzzy Zoeller, a Masters champion in his own right and a respected veteran on tour. The man it was about was John Daly, who by that point had already built one of the most self-destructive reputations in professional golf. This wasn't two strangers trading insults either. The two shared a friendship that lasted 3 decades, right up until Zoeller's death. Which is part of why the bet lands the way it does. It wasn't an insult from a stranger, it was a friend who'd known him for years, making an honest read on where things were headed. Daly told the story publicly years later, and the details are almost too on-brand to be fiction. It started with 9 holes on a Tuesday morning during Masters Week, then lunch at a restaurant called T-Bonds. Next thing I know, we were in the same clothes playing Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning at the Par 3 tournament. We stayed through the whole 9, drinking, having a good time and eating, Daly said. Somewhere in that stretch, Zoeller made it official. He told Daly, "I got 150 grand, you're never going to make it to 50. It was obviously not a formal bet, just a number and a deadline, tossed out between 2 guys who'd been up too long. But here's the part that turns this from a funny golf story into something with real weight behind it. To understand it, you have to understand what tour life actually looked like back then. In the 90s, drinking wasn't some hidden vice on the PGA Tour, it was baked into the culture. Players finished their rounds and went straight to the clubhouse bar for dinner and cocktails. It was normal. Daly, though, took a culture that was already loose and pushed it somewhere else entirely. By the time this bet was made, he had already been through 2 stints in rehab since winning the 1991 PGA Championship. He would go on to smoke roughly 2 to 2.5 packs of cigarettes a day for almost 30 years. At his heaviest, he was putting away close to 28 cans of Diet Coke in a single day. And his own coach at the time, Butch Harmon, had already said publicly that golf wasn't the most important thing in Daly's life, that getting drunk was. So when Zoeller said Daly wouldn't make it to 50, he wasn't just trying to throw a punchline. He was looking at a friend who was, by every visible measure, living like someone trying to burn out fast. The bet wasn't Zoeller being cruel, it was him being concerned. Of course it was dressed up as a joke, because that was the only way 2 guys like that knew how to say it out loud. Then, in April 2016, John Daly turned 50. And a few days later, in an interview with USA Today, Daly let everyone know about the bet. "Fuzzy's going to owe me 150 grand. I don't know if he remembers that bet or not, but I'll get that cash from him hopefully," he said. It never actually got settled the way Daly joked about it. Instead, when Daly and Zoeller were paired together the following week at the Insperity Invitational, Zoeller handed Daly a bottle of his own vodka brand and called it even. It made for a good week of golf headlines too. Daly wasn't just turning 50. That birthday also made him eligible for the PGA Tour Champions, the senior circuit, giving him a fresh start with 3-round events and a cart to ride in after years of grinding through regular tour fields on a bad back and bad knees. Between the new tour status and the vodka handoff with Zoeller, the story wrote itself. The wild man of golf had somehow outlasted his own reputation. On paper, that's a perfect story. The bet becomes a punchline, Daly beats the odds, the friendship gets a nice moment in the spotlight, done and dusted. But that's not actually where this ends. 4 years later, in September of 2020, John Daly withdrew from a Champions Tour event in Missouri. He told people it was back pain. He figured, like a lot of guys his age would, that it was kidney stones. It wasn't. When the urologist called him in, the news came fast and specific. Daly recalled being told, "It doesn't look like any stones are in there, but unfortunately, you have bladder cancer." He said he'd been about to sip a Diet Coke when the doctor stopped him mid-sentence. "Don't drink anything. We have to get you back in here and get this cancer out of you." Even with a tumor that needed to come out, Daly's response was pure Daly. "No matter what happens, I'm not scared to die or anything. But it would have been nice to play the last 7 or 8 or 13 years of my career a little more healthy." It's the same defiance that made him a fan favorite for 30 years. It's also, almost word for word, the attitude that got him into this position in the first place. Here's the detail that makes this more than just a golfer getting sick. Bladder cancer's single biggest risk factor, by a wide margin, is smoking. And Daly hadn't just smoked casually. He'd smoked roughly 2 packs a day, every day, for almost 3 decades, including right up through the week of this diagnosis. Suddenly, the joke from years earlier doesn't sound like a joke at all. Zoeller never said Daly would get hit by a car or die of old age. He pointed at the exact type of behavior, the drinking, the smoking, the pace Daly was living at, and said it would catch up to him before 50. It just took a little longer than Zoeller guessed. The disease that actually found Daly lines up almost perfectly with the habits that Original Bet was referring to. His doctor didn't sugarcoat what came next either. Daly said he was told there was an 85% chance the cancer would return. "Luckily for me, they caught it early," he said at the time, trying to stay upbeat about it. "But it doesn't look like it may go away. We'll just see what happens. Maybe there's a miracle." The surgery worked. Daly kept playing almost immediately, saying golf gave him something to focus on other than the diagnosis. The next December, he even won the PNC Championship playing alongside his son. He also started actually listening to the health advice he'd ignored for decades, cutting back the Diet Coke and seriously trying to quit smoking this time. In his interviews since the diagnosis, he said he's been in remission for several years and that he's gone from checkups every 3 months to every 6. But he's also been honest that it hasn't been a clean finish line. He said this in one of the interviews: "Fighting the bladder cancer and all that crap with all the surgeries, it's not an excuse. It's just nobody can play great when they're not healthy." So this was not a triumphant recovery story. It was a guy still managing the fallout of 30 years of taking his body for granted, even after the cancer itself was treated. Fuzzy Zoeller passed away in November of 2025 at age 74, and Daly, the one who wasn't supposed to see it, ended up outliving him. When the news broke, Daly posted a tribute. "To a best friend and a father figure who helped me a ton in my life. I'll miss you beyond words. Rest in peace, Fuzzy." It's tempting to look at all of this and call it a story about John Daly beating the odds. That framing misses what actually happened here, though. This was never really a story about that. It's a story about how little room he actually had left to work with. Zoeller wasn't guessing at a number. He was describing a lifestyle and where it usually leads. He got the year wrong, but the warning underneath it turned out to be almost exactly right.